What is the best Western Conference matchup? How will the battle of the MVP candidates affect their playoff series? Who is the next great college player? The only question left is, say it with me, you in? Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown Podcast. As always, on Mondays, although today is Tuesday, I'm joined by Coach Dave Dufour. Dave,
how's it going
today?
It's going pretty well for me. How about you?
It's going okay. Just dealing with all sorts of family stuff around the holidays, and it's sluggish. It's sluggish, like a wet sponge is really how I feel.
Well, I'm in Seattle, and it's basically a wet sponge outside every day.
Yes, a wet sponge wrapped in a wet blanket, probably.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. It's still cold here. I don't know how people live in this sort of weather.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, as I'm in, LA is beautiful and sunny, and it's been really nice the last several weeks. So, well, we won't sympathize. We will sympathize with our brothers across the nation and across the world in unfriendlier climes. But we should probably break into some NBA talk.
Absolutely. So I was thinking today we could do a Western Conference playoff preview.
That's a novel idea.
Since the East is not quite set yet.
That is true, insanity. And then also since, we'll be fighting through the thickets of every other podcast doing a Western Conference preview, so we'll have to make this one that much more exciting.
That's right.
And insightful. So,
exactly.
Let's jump in there with number 1 versus number 8, which I believe we have locked in. The Blazers ended up living up to what we had promised, which was an easier schedule for them, led to an 8th spot and a rematch with the Golden State Warriors. How many games is going?
I think it's going to be a sweep. I can't see the Blazers even winning a game.
Yeah, I hear you. It's too bad that Nurkic went down because it would have been interesting to see him go up against JaVale and Zaza and, cause some damage that would, then allow the others to sort of get free and maybe, get some easier shots. But you don't think that Lillard and McCollum are going to be able to go off for a game or two?
I just think that the Warriors have too much firepower. The defense is really, really good. And, yeah, I mean, how's the season series gone so far between these two?
That's an interesting question. Where would one find that information if one needed that?
Might have been smart for us to have had this pulled up beforehand.
All right. Well, I don't even know that stuff. Sometimes those stats get so complicated. But you know what? It'll be good because I'm sure our listeners want to know as well where they could find the head-to-head. 82 games. Where would you go for that? I don't even know.
I'm trying to pull it up.
Okay. So once you find it, we'll do it. But we'll keep talking about it while you're doing that. So, in a perfect world for the Blazers, Dame goes off for like 35. McCollum has 30, right? And they win 120 to 117 in a shootout. But yeah, I can't imagine that happening more than like once. Now, all the people who don't like Steph Curry could simply argue that, yeah, he won't be able to handle Dame the whole series. And, certainly Klay Thompson can defend CJ McCollum. I mean, that could be a matchup that wouldn't be completely, overwhelming for the Blazers when they're on offense. So, I don't know. What do you think? Although I guess the argument is that Klay ends up guarding Dame.
Right. And so, or CJ, I don't know. So the Warriors swept the season series. They won the first game by 23, then 45, then 8, and then won by 2 at the end of January. So yeah, I think they're going to sweep in the playoffs as well. As far as the matchup goes, I just think when the Warriors are clicking on defense, which, it's hard to say that they're not right now, having won 14 straight. I just think that they're nearly impossible to beat. They're on back-to-back 65-plus win seasons. Actually, this is now 3 in a row. It's sort of it's a really crazy run that they're on the last few years, and it's really fueled by the defense. I mean, their offense is historic and fantastic, but the defense is really what's so special about all this.
Oh, I agree. And I've been saying, someone asked me that on Twitter, like what's the best defensive team I've seen all year? And I told him, I said it was the Warriors, and people kind of scoffed at that. But I've seen enough of those, even if it's like in little bits and pieces, where you see multiple rotations and closeouts, and stopping the ball and the attack. It is as impressive as anything you see on offense, without question. And when you add Kevin Durant, who looked pretty damn good coming back his first game, did you see the first shot he got on his first game back?
I did not.
So, just a little bit of hezzy and then a blow by and a reverse dunk. Like, it was off 1 foot. Like, it was just like nothing, like he hadn't missed any time. So, even if he wants to use the first round to get back into shape, there's just they don't have an answer. Aminu is not the answer for KD.
Yeah, I don't know that there is an answer for KD when he's healthy and, playing with a bunch of guys like, Steph and Clay off the ball when KD has the ball. That's just so dangerous. And, KD for the last 2 years has been like the number 1 points per touch guy in the posts. So coming back from the knee injury, I actually expect to see him posting up even more.
I've been hoping to see him do it. He hasn't done it a ton, but he's been very good at it while he has. And, that hopefully that'll be a thing. Now, one of the reasons why he probably hasn't as much is that, they have these big leads a lot of the games. And it's like they don't need a bucket. We're like, okay, get your ass down there, throw down there for you, and we'll split and let you go. So maybe that'll happen in the playoffs. But I don't know. I just had a vision, write it down now, I just had a vision of a very anticlimactic playoff series for them all the way through to the finals and winning.
Yeah, I can see this team going 4-4-4-4. Really, they're really good, and they're hitting their stride just in the right time. So all right, that's probably enough about that series, because I think both of us agree that this is going to be a sweep and not even a fun one. So moving on to the other part of that bracket, we'd have Clippers Jazz. Now we still, as of recording this, we still don't know who's going to have home field. I think the Clippers own the tiebreaker due to their 3-1 series lead or season lead in head-to-head matchups. I don't know. Where do you see Jazz Clippers?
It's a weird thing because both these teams have sort of, we've had high hopes for both of them. I think certainly the way the Clippers started this year and the Jazz coming in with the additions they had. There's something missing with the Jazz. And I don't know if it's simply like the experience factor of them having to they got as much experience as they could possibly get in the regular season trials and travails of building a team together. And they just haven't forged that identity through a tough playoff series yet. And that might be what this year is going to be before they get to the next level. But there's just, it's hard to put a finger on it really of what it is. But they just don't seem to have a killer instinct. They don't seem to be able to sustain, or even play up to the opponent. And that's probably my biggest concern is that those big games they have, when they have a chance to really do something and they end up laying an egg, it has me concerned for the Jazz. Yeah,
I feel the same way. It seems like whenever they need a win, they either struggle to get it or don't get it. And so, yeah, I feel the same way. I have no confidence in them whatsoever. And I assume the Clippers win this series in 6.
Yeah, I guess 6 games sounds right because these teams are pretty evenly matched, and they do match up well. The Gobert versus DeAndre should be an interesting matchup, to say the least, because they're so active and they have a very strange impacts in the game in a non-traditional way on both sides. So that's interesting to me. And certainly, who is going to be able to guard Blake on the Jazz? How do they think they're going to do that?
Well, I'm assuming they're going to be throwing a series of different guys, probably Lyles and Diaw, at least to start. Favors is back, but I don't know how Favors looks. So Favors will probably start on him. Mm-hmm. And then they'll, just have a parade of other guys. I bet Joe Johnson gets a crack at it at some point. That's really, to me, he's their best 4 right now.
Sure.
I wouldn't try playing him for 30 minutes a night against Blake Griffin, but in stretches, I think he could handle it.
For sure. And, of course, we have the matchup, which is also interesting, between Hill and CP3. Oh, and by the way, with Joe Johnson guarding Blake down low, like I don't think the Jazz would mind him posting up the way Blake posts up now with his footwork, which is usually pretty atrocious. That they would probably invite that to some degree. He had one the other night that was all time. Like, you know, he jumps in the air with his back to the basket and then tries to twist and make it anyway. And he had one of those, but it was like I can't fathom how or where or how that developed, because it's just so weird and wrong. But getting to the CP3 matchup with Hill, that's also very intriguing to me. But I also feel like Chris Paul will dominate that one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Chris Paul, you know, it's a tradition for him to start stepping his game up toward the playoffs and in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of Chris Paul. George Hill is probably one of the better defensive point guards in the league. So it's going to be fun no matter what. That's the one good thing about this series, is that there's at least a couple of bright spots for me as far as guys to watch. So Chris Paul will be a pleasure. And I'm with you that the Gobert-DeAndre Jordan matchup, especially on the glass, is going to be very interesting to watch.
Sure. You know, I just did a quick look at the rankings over the last, 15 games. Because, you know, obviously with the Clippers, overall they're 5th in offensive rating and 13th in defensive rating, which is, 15th, or that's 13th is low for them. And anybody wants to compete for a title, for instance. And over the last 15 games for the Clippers, they're ranked 2nd offensively, which is interesting to me, and they're 15th in defense. They've gone down to exactly the average, but they're playing well. Their net rating is 2nd in the league, so there's something there. Now, if you want to hear the flip side here, overall the Jazz are ranked 12th on offensive rating and 3rd defensively. So they slipped a little bit. They were higher. They were 1st, I think, for a while, right? Defensively,
they were.
And so now, over the last 15 games, are you sitting down? They're 10th in offensive rating and 14th in defensive rating over the last 15 games.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I'm pretty sure Gobert's been playing all that time, right? Was he out at all?
No, he's been in.
So, because I usually say, oh, well, that's what it was, or someone's been injured. But I'm trying to think of who else has been injured for the Jazz in the last 15 games. That's a bad sign.
Yeah, you want to be playing your best basketball right now. Yeah. This is why Pop is pretty upset with his guys and says he's not resting anyone for the rest of the season.
Right.
They're not executing well. They're not playing good defense. So yeah, you want to be rolling into the playoffs.
Right. Exactly. And so we have two teams that are sort of not. I mean, it does feel like the Clippers are kind of status quo. They're not going backwards, but it does definitely feel like there's a slide going here defensively for the Jazz. And Chris Paul will just control the series, and that's the guy you want. He's that guy. You're going to the NCAA tournament. You want that veteran guard who's going to do it. He's that guy, and there's no question. I think that even if they don't have home court advantage, they're going to advance. How many games do you think they're going to need?
The Clippers?
Yeah,
I think they could win this in 6. The biggest key for me is Gordon Hayward. I keep hearing that Gordon Hayward is a superstar. Well, I need to see it. And, he'll be matched up with whoever's playing the 3 at any time for the Clippers, right? So it'll start out with Mbah Moute at first. And so I want to see Gordon Hayward dominate his matchup, and if that happens, I think that gives the Jazz a shot. This could go 7. It all depends. It's kind of a couple of weird teams who are in different stages of building to contention, and I think that the loser of this series should take a really close look at their personnel and consider shaking things up, particularly Clippers.
Well, the Clippers for sure. I mean, and they also are at the crossroads with a lot of their players anyway, contractually. So that's going to be a really big issue for sure. And certainly with the Jazz, I mean, to me, it's almost more like there's a natural evolution here. It's a little slow, but they are going through it over the last several years. And, perhaps a tweak here or there. You would have thought that Diaw and Joe Johnson, those are the guys those are the perfect, value guys that have experience that will do it. But, so far it hasn't worked out. Now, again, that could change. Joe Johnson could kind of put on his hard hat again, like we've seen a lot in the playoffs, and do some serious work and kind of be that Paul Pierce kind of guy for that saved. My goodness, Was it the Wizards? Is that's
It
where he
was,
was? Yeah, that one year.
yeah.
He could pull that off and win a game for them, and then that could propel them. So we'll have to take a look at it. But yeah, I could say 6 or 7 games. It should be entertaining to some degree. They're pretty well matched, but yeah, it just feels like in the end the Clippers have enough pride and experience to overtake it.
Yeah, we're pretty. There's a pretty good consensus on that.
All right. Well, that means we should move on to the next bracket, or the other side.
There you go.
So we have the Spurs versus the Grizzlies. This is an intriguing matchup, to say the least, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the Grizzlies they feel overqualified for being the 7th seed, but then you look at how they've played since the All-Star break, and it's not great, Bob. So they're sort of backing into the playoffs. They look like they're tired, like running on fumes a bit. And the Spurs are the Spurs. 60+ wins. Kawhi Leonard, the rightful MVP. Yeah. So, I think that the Spurs probably win this in 5, just because I give the Grizzlies a game at home. I think the Grizzlies match up about as well as anyone with the Spurs. They can match their size a bit. I just don't think they've got an answer for Kawhi Leonard. And that's going to be tough, especially in the playoffs. I mean, he's a machine.
He is a machine. I'm anxious to see him do it consistently over the course of several series. He's been doing it and doing it. And listen, there's nobody who's on his bandwagon earlier than me. And so, he's certainly proved under a lot of high-pressure situations against really good teams that he can be the man in scoring. And then it's funny because Aldridge is sort of the best forgotten player this year, I feel like. Like no one's talked about him much or given him much kudos, and yet here he is. He's had another good, solid offensive year like he normally has. He's been playing a lot better defense. I turn the game on. Whenever I turn a Spurs game on, there he is. He's making plays. He's blocking shots. He's getting deflections. He's getting rebounds. He's doing that more than he had, I think, in Portland. So you have that actually came up on Twitter. Who has the best 3-4 tandem between LeBron and Love, Kawhi and LaMarcus Aldridge? It's interesting.
I would probably go LeBron and Love, just because Aldridge just requires. He's a high usage player and doesn't shoot enough threes. If he would shoot more threes, I think he would increase his value.
Okay, that is true, and I don't think it's going to happen, right?
Well, he's shot more this year than he has ever, I think, and he looks good when he shoots them. I mean, he hits a high rate. So I would love to see him just add that a little bit more to his game, sort of like Kevin Love, like spot up a little bit more, give Kawhi a little bit more space to operate. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think he is forgotten. I don't know if he's a great player, but he's a good player. So, right. Yeah, I agree with you.
I have some numbers for you that are very interesting about the Spurs. Are you ready?
Yes.
So over the course of the season, the Spurs are ranked 7th in offensive rating. However, if we want to do our little crystal ball, the last 15 games, you want to guess what they're ranked?
14th.
17th.
Ooh.
Now, their
rough.
Defense has been held up at 2nd, and
right.
Their net rating is very good. But that's a slide for their offense. And I kind of suspect that when we look at Kawhi's numbers, we're going to see a little bit of a drop-off there as well, because that's how he goes, they go. And that's been my frustration with the Spurs for a long time now, is there just seems to be a time when they have beautiful basketball and the ball moves, but there are other times when they can't get the timing right, they can't get good shots, and they go through stretches where they don't score well.
Yeah, and this is where Aldridge should shine. When the Spurs struggle to get their movement going and to hit shots, they should be able to dump the ball to Aldridge in the post, either high or mid or low. The guy can operate just about anywhere and get a bucket. Last year we saw this when he had his 40-point game in the playoffs. I mean, he really was fantastic in that first series. So, I think that that's where Aldridge should be maybe getting used a bit more.
Yeah.
When the offense is struggling. But when the offense is clicking, I'd love to see him step out behind the line.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, the problem though is that when he gets used more, then the whole thing slows down and becomes ISO stuff, right? So, but then again, in reaction to it already kind of struggling for that couple stretches there, then maybe that is a solution. But it's almost like if you want to go to that, you risk stagnating the offense, and then maybe it doesn't work as well. So it's going to be an interesting dilemma. And then Popovich's rotations, like he's going to stick, I guess, with Parker. He's going to stick. At least he's got Powell coming off the bench, and that's working a lot better, in my opinion. It just looks better for them, and that rotation's better. But the Tony Parker conundrum is going to be an albatross.
Well, Patty Mills is actually playing a lot, which is good, and I think Tony Parker has been okay the last few weeks, but I just don't see how in the playoff series you can trust him in a pick and roll. Mike Conley is going to abuse Tony Parker. There's just no easy way to say that. That's going to be the most important matchup for the Spurs to try to win. They need to slow Mike Conley down. He's averaging over 20 points a game. It's actually the first time in his career, which is insane. And, if Powell and Parker are out there together, they're going to run Conley and Gasol and pick and roll. And I just don't see it. I just don't know how Parker can play more than 15 minutes a game.
I hear you, and and he'll probably get like 22 minutes a game or something like that. Let's just say, and I just hope it doesn't turn into a thing where they played him 3 minutes too long. Right, and they just that it went downhill for them in a way that they couldn't recover. These games can change on a trifle. Now, I don't think it's going to ultimately matter against the Grizzlies. There are some versions of the Matrix where the Grizzlies could maybe somehow upset them. Right, they still have Zebo, they still have Gasol, and they can go down low and get people in foul trouble and slow the game down and play to their strengths. Conley could go off, right? I mean, that's an interesting thing because Patty Mills is a much better defender, but still Conley could score on him too. So I don't know.
Well,
how many games do we think where this is going to go?
I'd say it's 5. I think it's going to be a gentleman's sweep. I think the Grizzlies win one at home.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, and this is all injury-free stuff, which is what we have to assume it's going to be. But either way, and by the way, the Grizzlies are the ones who should be more worried about that anyway, the way their seasons have been going over the last several. For me, the Grizzlies the key for them has always been Marc Gasol. He doesn't quite play like he's the number one option on their team. And I know he's a team player and he likes to pass, whatever, but there are times when he just doesn't put enough pressure on the defense. And if he does, and if he did, they would be much better overall as a team. But it would require him to be a lot more selfish.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think he's got to look to score like he did for a few games this year when Conley was out with the back injury. I think that's what they need to have any sort of success in the playoffs. I think that would be the way for them to go.
Yeah, and invariably when he's not being aggressive, then ultimately he gets the ball anyway with only like 4 seconds to go on the clock, and he has to throw up some horrible shot, and that's where he gets in trouble. Or he just there are moments where he just gets unaggressive and gets sort of not scared, but like overwhelmed by the moment, or it looks like, and just ends up not being effective. And that's when you got to have guys, and like Kawhi has learned that, right? He's learned how to manufacture his points. I mean, he hit one drive the other day that was like a half euro hanging, just about almost traveled, but like hovered in the air with his claws, one hand off the glass, and it was just like that. You don't practice that shot. He just did it and it made it, and it wasn't. He probably had never shot that one before, and that's that's the indication you're getting from a guy like him.
Yeah. Let's move to probably the most compelling series of the first round in the West. It's Rockets Thunder.
Yes, the Brody versus the Beard.
That's right. We're battle of the MVP candidates.
Yeah, and by the way, do you get the MVP award during the first round? Please tell me you do.
No, you know what? They're doing that awards show this year.
Oh, remind me when.
I think it's after the season. But the guys are all going to be there. And they're doing
so
like
weird.
Awesome. It is weird.
So they're not going to do it in the stadium where the hometown can bow down?
Yeah, well, TV money, man. TV money.
And so in the sense, like it's just another reason to have a whole other show with sponsors and the whole thing. Wow. That is terrible. I think it's terrible.
It's in June. Yeah, so I think it's June 26th. So
That's terrible, because they owe it to us to have one of them win it and have the other one have to stand there and watch him get it before the game starts in a playoff series. That's not right.
man, back in my day, those guys would have gotten into a fight and the winner gets the MVP award.
Yeah, well, or at the very least, we would see the guy who lost it just light the other team up or whatever that is, and so
I think
that's too bad.
Crazy.
But we do have the matchup at least.
Yeah, look, I mean, for whatever it counts, they're not going to guard each other. So I don't know. I don't know how much of a head-to-head matchup it is. I mean, certainly their teams are head-to-head, and I think the Rockets are a better team. And I don't expect them to have a whole lot of trouble with the Thunder. The Rockets won the season series 3-1, but most of the games were actually really close. There's a 2-point game, a 3-point game, and then the last 2 games have been decided by 2 points. So the games have been close, but they haven't necessarily felt close. It's more like the Rockets have gotten a big lead and the Thunder come back, which has been the Thunder's MO this year. Their defense really locks in when they get behind by like 15, and then Russ just goes supernova and brings them back.
Yep, that's a hard thing to obviously count on in the playoffs. It's just like a thing that, if that's what you're hanging your hat on, you're going to be in trouble without question. By the way, is it James Harden's fault that his team is better?
No.
Like, the argument tends to be, well, he's got better teammates, this is why he's doing all that stuff. And it's like, well, okay. Well, what am I supposed to do with that information? Like, I guess if we have to compare people, how much better are his teammates? And then how do you ever measure that?
Yeah, I actually, if we're going to talk about the MVP briefly, I mean, I guess this is as good a time as any to do it. I care about winning games, and I tend to lean toward best player on the team. On like one of the best 2 teams in the league, right? I actually think Steph Curry deserves a little bit of recognition toward the MVP. I mean, with what these guys are doing numerically, obviously it's difficult to say Steph is the MVP, but he's the best player on the best team, and they're head and shoulders above everyone else. So I just think we tend to look too much at the statistics rather than what's actually happening on the floor.
Well, you're also making an assumption of what the MVP award really is. Is it the best player on the best team? Is it the person who's the most valuable player on his team? Because then you start getting into, well, how well do they do when he's off? And again, that isn't a fair assessment either, because now you're taking into consideration the bench, and how that all plays out, and that's not necessarily his fault or his credit. It's kind of that's why it feels kind of arbitrary. And
why can't Anthony Davis be MVP?
Right. Certainly the drop off. I have to look at it. I'd imagine the drop off is probably the steepest with him, or whatever metric you want to come up with on off for that. So yeah, it's like is that the criteria we're looking at? Because that seems to be what the Westbrook fans would have you believe, because they want to factor that in of how good the teammates are. Like, oh, Russ would average even more assists because if his teammates were better. I mean, would he? He's up to 10 something. That's a lot of assists. It's like I don't know. If he played with maybe better teammates, he wouldn't have a high usage rate or as high, and then he wouldn't get all the other opportunities.
Right.
So that's why it just kind of feels arbitrary. It's like a big shrug emoji to me, or shrug.gif. That's my new thing, I guess. And it's like the extra couple rebounds he's getting a game. A lot of that is those missed rebounds that they're clearing out for him to get. And then we talked about that before. Like, there's no fast break after a missed free throw. You're not like, it's not a strategy that's like for offense. This is just a strategy to get them more rebounds. Yeah.
After a missed free throw, you're normally running to a set defense. So, yeah. Anyway, all right, look, that's enough about the MVP.
It is.
This series, again, it's the most compelling because it has Harden versus Westbrook. And I think that I expect to see both of these guys. This could be an epic series. I wouldn't guess that it goes more than 6. I think the Rockets win. But this is probably the best real upset chance that we have in the playoffs, just because if the Rockets are cold and Russ goes off, you never know what's going to happen. It's the rust factor is unpredictable. He could do what he did the other night in Denver and go for a 50-point triple-double with a game winner. Or he could, lay up a stinker and not be able to hit a single shot. I mean, not a stinker as in like no points, but maybe like 20 on like 40 shots.
Right. No, that or and by the way, maybe he's erased this from his game, but up until the last like half of the season, you get Russ into a pressure situation at the end of the game, and more often than not, he will do something bad that will cost them the game. A mistake, a turnover, a bad shot, whatever. Now, that said, recently he's turned that around, and I'll give him all the credit in the world. I mean, granted, like the three he hit the other night, I don't know how lucky it was, but he hit it, and he made the play,
That's right.
He made it work. Whereas in the past, there have been times when he hasn't, and there was no other decision that he did for that. He had to shoot it, and he made it. Whereas other times he's come down and shot a deep three way too early or something like that, or turned it over when that stuff. So that's what you get to really watch for is Russell Westbrook now the kind of guy who can down the stretch consistently in a playoff series make the correct decisions and not torpedo the team, because he could have a 40-point on a highly efficient game with all these assists and then blow it at the end.
Yeah, well, so for me, it's more the defensive end that I worry about Russ. On the offensive end in crunch time, the last few months, he has just been incredible, like otherworldly sort of performance. He's been efficient. He's been scoring at a high volume. He's, like, I don't know how many game winners he's hit in the last 2 months. I mean, he has had a crazy stretch. So on the offensive end, I think he's got it figured out. But now we need to see it on the defensive end. Can he not break down, like not give up scoring opportunities to the guy he's guarding, make the correct switch at the right time, rotate when he's supposed to, and things like that. Because I haven't seen that yet.
Right.
So he's got a lot of good defensive players there that can cover for him. I think it's no surprise that they've been better since Taj Gibson's gotten there. I think he's a great guy for that team. And again, of any series that we could see a real legit upset, not a 4-5, but the 6-3, I think that this is the one. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch. My opinion is still that the Rockets win it in 6, but I think it's close 6.
Yeah, I mean, I would say 6 max, 5, 6. I mean, the biggest problem the Rockets have is the defensive end as well. They're very average there. They haven't been able to display like sustained effort enough to get like multiple stops in a row. Ultimately they'll hit a couple threes, and that kind of gets the game a little bit wider open for them. But that's ultimately what's going to doom the Rockets, is that they simply can't seem to put together a 5 that's stout enough on defense to compete at the upper levels. But that's not as big of a worry, I'd imagine, against the Thunder, who are very unimaginative, I suppose, in their attack.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you know what's coming, it's a little bit easier to defend. And they've played each other 4 times this year. There shouldn't be any surprises.
Right.
So yeah.
But it will definitely be poetic to see both those guys go at each other, and also just to imagine they all were on the same team. They had a team that had KD, Russ, Ibaka, Harden, Reggie Jackson. I'm forgetting somebody else. Somebody else on that team.
Yeah.
Who?
They had a lot of people on those teams. Nick Collison, legend.
Oh, hey, yeah, right. I mean, Kendrick Perkins, but still.
I think that this series actually could give us like some iconic moments, because I think that they're going to have at least 2 games where they're going back and forth, Russ and Harden. And I think, this could be the Dominique MJ back and forth game. Like, I mean, it really could be that extreme. It wouldn't shock me if they both scored 50 points in a game, against each other in this series.
No, and we all win, that without question.
Right. This is going to be probably the most fun first-round series for everyone.
Right. I cannot wait. And by the way, we're going to be all over all these series. and we're going to be covering it as much as possible. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around how we're going to get our heads into all of these different games and also live. But we'll be coming at you in waves, so it's really important that you guys, if you're not following me or Dave on Twitter, because that's going to be the best way to there might be stuff that happens last second that we're going to jump on and do. Then you got to get on Twitter and just be aware. I mean, otherwise we'll have to come up with another platform if people can be aware of the stuff. We'll probably have it on our website too. So. And don't forget, on our website we're going to have daily analysis of all that stuff, which is going to be really the best stuff you're going to read anywhere on the NBA.
Yep. So not only are we going to be doing that, but we're also going to be bringing in other people to help us analyze this stuff, because there will be times where you and I have the same opinion, and sometimes I want to get a third party in to just disagree with us.
Right. And we'll figure that out too, because we did a 3-man the other day, or a few weeks ago, and it worked really well. So we'll continue to bring in other people too, because I don't want to agree with you all the time.
Yeah, I know, that's too boring. I might have to just be a little bit more combative just to make it interesting.
Right. Yeah, like storm off the set, and that's okay.
Right.
I'll block you on Twitter next time. Come at me. So well, listen. What else we have to talk about? Anything?
So, we'll do the Eastern Conference preview once that's set. So we'll probably record that Wednesday night after the final games of the regular season, and that should be ready for Thursday morning. And then the playoffs start Saturday. So, it's crazy that the season is just about done.
It is. This is a very weird season, and it was kind of taxing, and also went by very quickly. It's hard to kind of understand what happened and all the different storylines, especially because, and then going back to the MVP vote, which you didn't get to drop your bomb, which you think that it's Kawhi. I'm going to speak for you.
I think it's cool.
We've never had 4 legit and maybe even 5 legit guys who should get first place votes, and that just makes everything so interesting and weird because it's so rare that happens. Yeah, the reality is that the way we all should look at this is that if Russ wins, it's great, right? And if James Harden wins, that's great. And if Kawhi wins, that's great. It's so close that it's not worth arguing about. You know what I mean? It's fun to argue about it, but it's not worth arguing about. It's a bit arbitrary, and it's going to be in the hands of the voters. And if I was putting money on who wins, I would say James Harden. But the tide seems to have started shifting toward Russell Westbrook. Yeah. Oh, I think it's shifted. I think that Harden hurt his wrist, whatever. His shooting went down a little bit. Their season, they've kind of leveled off a little bit as well. And so I feel like, their records, someone just sent me over their records over the last 30-some games are almost the same, the Rockets and the Thunder. And so I think those things might tug a little bit. I think Harden was a lock about 2 or 3 weeks ago. He was a lock to win the MVP as the voters. Again, it's not who I think should win. It's who was going to win. And right. I don't know. For some reason, the way that Russ has kind of done this, he's exploded. He's hit some serious game winners. Those are the things. Those highlights are going to stick in their minds. And I'm convinced it's going to be Russ. And again, it doesn't really matter what I think. It's who's going to win it. It also has to figure out what does it mean, because I don't think I even expressed my opinion what the MVP is. In reality, it's it probably should be who had the best year, shouldn't it? I guess. I don't know. I tend to lean toward best player on the best team, which is why I come up with Kawhi. Also, Kawhi is, what he's doing on the defensive end, none of those other guys are doing. I just think that he affects the game in so many ways that are hard to quantify. But, you know it when you see it. Yeah. I'm going to try and do a series of 4 of these videos over the next few days on the MVP, if I can get to it before the playoffs start, 1 each. And so, the question now is, do I bring up, that Reddit thing where Russ doesn't contest any threes? He literally hangs around the basket looking for rebounds, which I don't know if I've even really seen with my eyeballs definitive proof of that. Have you? No. I mean, I've seen it a little bit, but it's more when he's late on a rotation. It's not. I don't think he's planning it ahead of time. I just think he's late on a rotation, so he's getting in position to rebound. I don't mind that he rebounds. I don't mind that he grabs rebounds on free throws. I don't. That stuff doesn't bother me. But I'm not actually bothered at all by Russell Westbrook. I just think that
the wins have to matter at some point. The whole point of that, the whole reason you play the game is to win.
Right.
So,
well, although I do feel like if you want to consider these the rebounding rate a little bit inflated, that's sort of the crux of their argument are the triple doubles. And the only thing that's different about him this year that you would have thought would have been different is the rebounds, because certainly getting his 28, 29, 30 points a game was a no-brainer before the season started. And the way he dominates the ball, 10 assists is is about where he should be anyway. It was the rebounds that somehow catapult him above Harden in this conversation, and that's sort of what's troubling, is because those are inflated. There's no question I've seen him disconnect from the defense to be near the basket for rebounds.
Well, but this, you're making the argument about free throws or rebounds on free throws, but people are going to say, well, Harden's assists are inflated because of Mike D'Antoni's system, right?
Okay.
Because he has the ball in his hands a lot, but Harden is a fantastic passer. I just look again, arguing the numbers is just not going to work for me, because I can blow those numbers up with whatever I want to come up with.
What's this 25-25 thing that Harden has?
25-25.
Someone's touting, and I don't know what it means. I think it means maybe 25 points, and then somehow when you add up the assists that go for threes, do you know what that is? Something like that. And I don't know what it meant, but I got someone tell me on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't know. People are just making up stats now. I don't know.
Right. And by the way, in other years, it might be stats might not be or might be a useful way to look at it. But when you're talking about Russ and Harden, they're so gaudy with their stats. It's such a stuffed, filled of stocking of potpourri of numbers that it's like there really isn't any argument you're going to win there.
When was the last time that the MVP was won by someone on a team that didn't win 50 games?
I don't know.
That's where I stand. So anyway, that's enough about the MVP. I really honestly, I'm burnt out from it. And I had people telling me that after Russ hits a game winner with a 50-point triple double, which is fantastic, that they changed their mind about who the MVP is. And I just think it's about the entire body of work, not just one game or a few hot weeks. Which is why I don't think Curry should be the MVP just because he's gotten hot the last couple months. I think Curry's had a really good year. He's been the best player for the Warriors, and they're the best team. So I think that's why he should be fifth.
Right, and people argue that too. But it's an interesting discussion, and I'm glad that we can have it. It certainly gives us a good forum to, I like this conversation better than anything else, and I know you want to get rid of it, and I'm like, let's keep talking about it. But either way, I think we've come to the end. We had an energetic one today. Yeah. Well,
before we wrap up, I've been in Portland at the Nike Summit all week, and so if I could just for a second just tell you, Michael Porter Jr. is one of the most impressive young basketball players that I've seen in person ever. This guy is, he's the number one pick, hands down, next year.
Is he from here? Where
is he? He's from Missouri, and then he was playing in high school ball for Brandon Roy at Nathan Hale in Seattle.
Ah, okay. And so you watched him in the Nike. So he's going to be a freshman in college next year?
Yes, at Missouri.
At Missouri. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, he decommitted from Washington when they fired Romar.
Ah, that's a blow for Washington fans. So so he's going to go to Missouri, and okay, that's very fascinating. Now, so we obviously one and done.
I would assume so. I think the guy's ready to play now.
What position does he play?
So he's going to be a 4.
Oh.
He's a stretch 4, and he's a legit lights out shooter. 47% from 3, 86% from the line. He's got a beautiful jump shot. I mean, it is just a joy to watch. I mean, it is beautiful. Very smooth game, super athlete. Needs to work on his handle a little bit, but most of those guys do.
How tall is he?
I think he's 6'10".
Wow. Okay.
In shoes.
I was picturing a guard. Okay, for some reason.
Yeah. No. Huh. Yeah, so he's 6'10" in shoes. He's going to be great. So
who's going to be better, Zion Williamson or him?
I don't know, because I've only seen Zion Williamson dunk. They're really impressive dunks, but that's all I've seen.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, we'll have to keep our eye on that. Any other thing that came out of that you connected with?
There's another younger guy, R.J. Barrett. He's Canadian. He's Rowan Barrett's son. He's going to be really good, but he's only 16, so he's a few years away.
Okay, good. Well, glad that you had a good trip there, and now that unfortunately you're stranded getting your van detailed in Seattle. But is there any hope that the weather's going to get better?
No, this week is supposed to be chilly and wet here in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, it's brutal.
All right, well, stay in your hotel room then, I guess, and we'll keep talking, and we'll hook up again. Man, your arms are hairy. My goodness. I did not realize that. Like upper arm. So anyhow, all right. Well, we'll get back to you for the Eastern Conference once that gets solidified. And then don't forget, we're going to be doing podcasts 3 times a week. So I think Dave and I, we're going to be hooking up twice a week. And then I'll have my other one with somebody else. I get to cheat on Dave once a week. It's a really great setup we have, right?
That's right. That's right. It works well for me too.
We keep it fresh.
That's right.
The mystery is still there. So anyway, thanks for coming on the show, Dave. Thanks for joining us. Awesome stuff. We'll stay tuned really quickly. We'll have the other stuff up soon. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel. We're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Dave?
Yes, I am.